Chapter 71. Make Her His. Owen, who had been dejectedly sitting across the street from Whispering Way, in a block facing Mia's window, had seen a mysterious man climb up to her window. He had been sitting there because he was looking forward to hearing her sing at night. Even though he couldn't touch her, he wanted to hear her voice, but seeing the man climb up had stunned him. He would have thought the man was a thief if he hadn't glimpsed the professional business suit he was wearing. Owen felt a jab to his heart. It was like the tiny hope of making Mia his had come shattering down into pieces. Did she really not like him more than a friend after all the years they'd been together? She was his life and hope, but she had decided to abandon him as well, just like he had been abandoned years ago. Watching the man climb the window, Owen's hands balled into fists as his mind wandered back to the first day he met Mia. She had come into his life at the time he had thought no one wanted him and no one cared. At the age of 7, Owen's world crumbled when his mother died of cancer. She left him feeling abandoned at the hands of his irresponsible father who lived his life in a useless way after the death of his wife. His father had changed completely and lived solely on alcohol without a worry that he had a son to care for. He stopped going to work and neglected Owen. Sometimes, he would get too drunk and beat up the little boy for no reason. The emotional void widened in his heart, leaving young Owen adrift in a sea of loneliness and hatred. He would hate his father and felt a strong urge to strangle him to death in his sleep. He would have many dark thoughts on how to kill himself, along with his useless father, at times. Owen even got involved with the street bad boys in his early teen years. He smuggled things to different hidden districts in the country while pretending to be a schoolboy. He did all that just so he could get his father's attention, but the man was like a living dead with mood issues. Despite being arrested 2 times, his father still didn't care about him. Owen felt more and more anger and hate towards the only family he had left. There was even a time he had wanted to kill his father and make it appear like an accident, but he'd thought twice about it because he didn't want to live in foster care where he had learned that the kids there were mistreated. He would rather live a free life in his darkened head and thoughts than be with people who would mistreat him again. Then, like a ray of sunshine in the darkness, Mia and her mother arrived in town. Their arrival was a spark of light in Owen's bleak existence. Mia's lovely laughter echoed like a melody, and her mother's kindness became the warmth he longed for. For the first time, he felt seen, acknowledged, and loved. He'd thought he would never step back into his lonely life now that he was welcomed by the Harrisons' small family. Elizabeth treated him so well he no longer felt the absence of his late mother. He spent most of his days with the Harrison mother and daughter that he no longer cared what his father did. Because of them, he stopped his job of smuggling things for people and decided to focus on his studies. Mia, with her infectious smile and boundless energy, became his lifeline. Yet, as the years passed, an invisible thread began to tighten around Owen's heart. Mia's growing independence awakened a possessiveness within him. He couldn't afford to see her playing with others or mingling with them, because he feared she would forget about him just like his father had done. The fear of being abandoned, ingrained in his soul since childhood, morphed into an overprotective grip. "You can't trust men, Mia," he would tell her when she was beginning to approach the age of puberty. "If you don't want the nightmares about the blood you used to see come true, you have to stay wary of any man who develops interest in you. If you want to live a long and happy life, you can't trust any man but me." Mia, who was no more than 13 years old, would laugh and say, "I don't want any man in my life if he doesn't have gray eyes like that poster in my room. And I won't trust any man but you alone. We will be friends forever." Owen would always be satisfied at how easy it was to manipulate the young Mia into staying away from any males. He had made sure no man would dare approach her. And he believed her obsession with gray eyes was just a childish thing that would fade away, but he was surprised she grew with it and believed she would only date a gray-eyed man. However, Owen didn't let that bother him as he had never seen any man with gray eyes in person, unless movie stars. As they grew older, his affection for Mia evolved into an obsession masked by a brotherly facade. He couldn't bear the thought of her happiness relying on anyone but him. He had envisioned their lives together, and that image he had created in his mind had been his push towards being a better man and having a better future. He had strived hard in his studies so he could afford to work in a decent company someday and build a big restaurant for Mia's mother and then eventually marry Mia. But it seemed everything he believed was coming down slowly. In the past, each smile Mia shared with a man other than him felt like a betrayal, and the idea of her heart belonging to someone else would always make him go crazy. The night she was dropped at home by that gray-eyed man, his fragile patience shattered, leaving him drowning in a sea of rage and perceived betrayal, which had led him into hitting the man with the stone. Owen had no regrets. If he knew where the man lived, he wouldn't hesitate in tracking him down and killing him for laying a hand on his Mia. When Owen had seen a man in a suit climbing up Mia's room, he had wanted to get up and stop the man, but then he stopped himself. Not for any reason, but because he wanted to test Mia and see if she was truly going after rich men like everyone had been saying in whispering way. If she wasn't expecting the man and didn't know him, she would scream for help. If she knew him, they would probably be doing exactly what he knew she had been doing with the rich man who had dropped her off today at the junction with shopping bags. Earlier in the day, when his friends saw him drinking, they had walked up to him, rubbing salt into his already opened wound by saying, "Just let the whore go. Julie told me she's only after rich men. With your current life condition, Mia will never give you a chance. You have no wealth nor fame, man. Yes, Cal is right, Owen. If she is ever going to like you, it will only be when you possess a big house and an expensive car. Women don't like to go for cheap stuff after getting a taste of an expensive thing." Owen had wanted to defend Mia like he used to do in the past whenever anybody dared to speak bad of her, but he was too drunk to fight. He had listened to all their nonsense about her, but he hadn't fully believed them because he had been friends with her for longer than anyone. He knew her so much and also knew how materialistic things don't mean anything to her. But remembering the expensive guitar he had seen in her room when he went to look for Rain's phone number, he was beginning to doubt that. He wasn't stupid not to recognize the Harmony Lux Virtuoso logo on the guitar. Any instrument from that brand was limited edition, and their price could buy a house. Even the elite family don't have free access in buying things from that brand. He knew of the facts because he liked to do research about expensive things so he could save money to buy things for Mia. He had plans of spoiling her when he would graduate and get a job so she wouldn't look elsewhere. However, things weren't going as he had planned. Mia had found another man who was spoiling her with his wealth behind his back. A man Owen couldn't match with unless he also became rich. The only way he would ever make Mia look at him and run to him whenever she wanted and needed something was if he were to make a name for himself in the country. In that moment, Owen had a rough idea. Only when he became rich would she give herself to him and love him. She would love him if he bought her a house and a car. She would never look past him again if he were to own a big business in the country. A few minutes later, Owen watched the man climb down her window and leave while Mia stood watching him from the window. He clenched his fists around the letter he had received a moment ago from a mysterious organization that had been trying to convince him to be one of them. But because he didn't want to go back to his old ways and disappoint Mia, he had always refused them and was even tempted to report them to the authorities, but he hadn't for some reason. However, as if they knew he was at his lowest, they had approached him again with the promises of changing his life if he became one of them. He would get anything and everything he desired in life. And what he desired the most was to make Mia Harrison his woman. He would become rich and spoil her rotten until no man could ever give her what he could. You want money, right? I will give you money, Mia. Chapter 72. Mysterious Box. In one of the luxurious hotels in Zen City, the Lavish Leaf Hotel, Jason hosted a night social club. He invited a few of his military friends and his business partners from his father's company. He made sure the business partners were standing separately from his military friends. He also made sure to invite a few people from the media, as what he was about to do would blow up in the news industry by tomorrow if Neil Weiner were to show up. If Mia Harrison was indeed someone he was interested in, Jason was sure Neil's temper would take over all reason, and he would show up tonight to confront him after reading the message he sent him. "I thought you said you invited Major General?" asked one of Jason's military friends as they stood around the poolside, smoking with glasses of expensive wines in their hands. They had all been invited by Jason, who told them that their Major General had been invited and that there was something important Neil wanted to share with them tonight. All the soldiers assigned to this mission were staying with their families before Neil Weiner, their Major General, would have any news about the drug syndicate's location. They had worked with Neil many times on secret missions, but this was the only one taking the longest time to get over with. However, none of them were complaining, as they knew their Major General never disappointed when it came to uncovering a criminal. Most of the soldiers admired Neil and would do anything to be closer to him. When Jason invited them, saying that Neil would be there, They were excited to socialize with their serious-minded Major General. They all knew that Neil believed attending irrelevant gatherings like men's social clubs was a waste of time. They had never seen him attend any gathering unrelated to his mission. Thus, since Jason had said he was coming today, then it must be something important. However, they had been waiting for over an hour, and Neil still hadn't shown up. This made them doubt Jason's words. Why would General Wayner even come when he wasn't friends with Jason, nor was he fond of the media? They all knew the bad blood between them, so why would he come to a gathering hosted by his rival? Jason, who noticed the doubt in the soldiers' eyes, was slightly upset at the fact that no matter what he did, they would never see him as a hero like they saw Neil Wayner, who was an evil villain pretending to be a hero to the world. However, today he planned to end all of his hero facade in front of everyone, and the world would know what sort of person he was. You know how General Wayner is. He likes to show up late to get the attention. I'm sure he's on his way here, Jason said with a tight smile while hiding his displeasure behind the glass of wine he was sipping. The soldiers who heard him couldn't help but snicker. Wasn't it Jason who always showed up late to gain attention? Ha! He should have just invited them without using their general's name as an excuse to get them all to show up tonight. They were all tired and would have loved to be in bed, but because they wouldn't want to miss an opportunity to get on their general's good side, they had all showed up. I hope as hell he shows up because I would hate it that I missed my cozy bed with my lovely wife because of a normal social club with a bunch of camera people flashing around, said the military second-in-command, who was a tall, bulky man with thinning blonde hair and blue eyes. He didn't like Jason, nor did he like Neil, but he had come here because he believed Neil was coming here to give them some info about his search in Ivy Grove Institute. He was looking forward to getting their mission over with so he could receive the extra bonus from the president, but it seemed their Major General was delaying this time. Oren, you take everything too professional. Just enjoy the night and don't worry because I know our general will show up. Jason patted the bulky man's shoulder as he internally cursed Neil for coming late. From what he'd heard from his sister, Neil had shown interest in this girl not because of their mission, but for some personal reasons. Diane Foster was the girl he should be roaming around, getting her to give him more details, but instead he was always with Mia Harrison. It could only mean one thing: he was neglecting their mission for a woman. As Jason was beginning to doubt his theory about what he thought about Neil's relationship with this Mia, who he had gone as far as to spend more than $1 million on the things he bought her just to irk Neil into confronting him, he noticed the devil's best friend, Liam, walked into the poolside of the hotel. What in the name of hell was he wearing? Jason thought in disbelief as he took in what the young man was wearing to his gathering. Liam was wearing what looked like mismatched nightwear, a plain blue shirt with flashy green trousers, along with fluffy snowshoes that looked like something a girl would wear in her room. Was this man high on drugs or what? Liam sauntered into the poolside with a nonchalant air around him. He was holding a sleek black box in hand, his unprofessional attire drawing mixed reactions from the crowd. He could feel everyone's eyes and could hear their whispering, but he remained unfazed. He had purposely dressed like this to show everyone he wasn't interested in being here. If it wasn't for Neil calling him and instructing him to pick up some black box at his condo and deliver it to his friend, Jason, Liam would have preferred to be at home, enjoying the company of the 2 women he had invited over that evening. However, it seemed that every time he attempted to have some fun, Neil always managed to spoil it for him. While Neil had somehow mastered the art of controlling his manly desires, Liam was quite the opposite. In fact, he had a strong sexual appetite that he couldn't go a day without satisfying with one of his mistresses. But just whenever he was about to get down to business, his phone would ring, and it would turn out to be his party pooper of a friend calling to get him to do something. Liam didn't know the contents of the box or why Neil had asked him to deliver it to Jason. Nevertheless, he had agreed to carry out the task, along with passing on Neil's message, purely to witness Jason's reaction. Liam couldn't help but think that Jason must be out of his mind to expect Neil to attend such a gathering. Liam took his time walking towards Jason, his devil-may-care attitude evident in the way he whistled a carefree tune. All eyes turned to him, and the soldiers in the gathering, familiar with Neil's best friend, craned their necks to see if they had come together. However, Liam had come alone without their general. Jason, frowning deeply at Neil's absence behind his crazy friend, couldn't hide his frustration. Still, he plastered on a smile as Liam approached, despite the fact that he disliked him almost as much as Neil. "Where's your friend?" Jason inquired, attempting to conceal his disdain. Liam, with a crooked grin and a twinkle in his black eyes, replied, "Oh, he sends his regards, but he's got more pressing matters to attend to than to be at this." "What is the purpose of this gathering again?" he asked while casting a curious gaze at the media people around the poolside. He hadn't noticed them earlier because they were standing in the shadows of the area. Was Jason trying to reveal Neil's identity to the world? "Do I have to have any purpose for wanting to have fun with my friends?" Jason frowned. Liam shrugged while casually saying, "The last time I checked, Neil isn't your friend, unless you're still living in one of your Delulu worlds you've created in your head." Jason ignored Liam's sarcastic remark and took in his mismatched attire again. Because he couldn't resist mocking him, Jason said, "Did you mistake this for a pajama party? Or did you come to the wrong place?" Liam chuckled in amusement as he wasn't one bit affected by Jason's jab before he replied with a crooked grin, "Ah, Jason, don't you know the saying, comfort over style?" he asked, but Liam didn't allow him to reply. He handed the black box to Jason, who eyed it warily. "Consider it a token of apology from the Major General, my dear Jason. My friend is tied up, but he thought I should drop this off to you," Liam said, his voice dripping with a twisted sense of humor. Though to those who don't know Liam that well, they would see him as a charming, handsome man with an easygoing personality. But the soldiers around knew him well enough not to take him lightly. They knew how crooked his head was when it came to torturing the enemy. He would kill someone with a harmless smile on his face. And seeing the box he was handing over to Jason, it wouldn't come as a surprise to them if they found someone's limb laying inside it. It was no wonder he was a close friend of their bad-tempered Major General, who they were all disappointed about the fact that he didn't show up. However, their curiosity to see what was inside the black box took over their disappointment of his absence. Jason, swallowing his pride, managed to force a smile as he accepted the black box. "Tell him we missed him," he muttered through gritted teeth as he was fuming in rage for his well-planned scheme going to waste. What was in the box, and why would Neil ever bother to send a gift as an apology because he was unable to show up? What if it was something that would kill all of his guests if he opened it? He wouldn't underestimate someone who had killed innocent people just to quench his temper. And knowing what he had sent to Neil this afternoon on text, he was hesitant to even hold the box properly. It could be an explosive or even something more harmful. But then, knowing that Neil wasn't stupid enough to destroy his own hero image in the eyes of the media, Jason was sure he wouldn't send something harmful. Liam, instead of making a swift exit as he planned, urged Jason with a twisted grin on his handsome face as he couldn't help but be curious about what was inside the box. "Come on, Jason, don't keep us in suspense. Open the box. Neil put a lot of thought into this, you know." Jason shot him a glare, but sensing the growing curiosity around him, he reluctantly started to open the mysterious black box. As he peeled back the lid with a slightly trembling finger, something unexpected happened. Chapter 73. How he got the CEO's personal business card. Liam, instead of making a swift exit as he planned, urged Jason with a twisted grin on his handsome face, as he couldn't help but be curious about what was inside the box. "Come on, Jason, don't keep us in suspense. Open the box. Neil put a lot of thought into this, you know." He said this just to get Jason to open the box so he could see what his friend had decided to give his rival. Liam was sure whatever was inside the box wouldn't be something good because Neil Wayner never sent gifts. Jason shot him a glare, but sensing the growing curiosity around him, he reluctantly started to open the mysterious black box. As he peeled back the lid with a slightly trembling finger, something unexpected happened. A clenched iron fist bounced off the box like a jack-in-the-box and slammed squarely against Jason's nose. Surprised and caught off guard, Jason let go of the box, which spilled its remaining contents onto the ground. Alongside the fist was a scattered spray of tiny clothing fabric. Astonished gasps erupted from the onlookers. The camera people, who had been eagerly waiting for a moment to capture, quickly stood up, their flashes creating a frenzy of lights around the poolside. Jason, clutching his seemingly broken nose, struggled to make sense of what just happened. "What the hell, man?" he exclaimed, his voice muffled by the blood rushing from his nose. He looked down and noticed the pieces of clothes on the ground were the fabrics of the clothes he had spent over $1 million to buy for Mia Harrison. So Neil didn't show up to confront him, but instead played a cruel prank to embarrass him at his own gathering? Whispers and hushed conversations spread through the crowd. "Did you see that?" someone muttered. "Who sent the box?" another person questioned. But a few of the soldiers who knew who sent the box chuckled at the unexpected turn of events unfolding before them. It seemed Jason had offended their major general and had received his medicine. They all knew how Neil couldn't control slamming his fists on someone who messed with him, and since he didn't come, he sent his fist. Liam, who hadn't expected this at all, grinned in amusement and relief. Thank goodness his own curiosity hadn't pushed him into opening the box on his way here. He would have been the one to receive that iron fist. However, what was the use of the pieces of torn clothes in the box? Liam thought to himself as he noticed the tiny fabrics on the ground. Nonetheless, remembering that he hadn't relayed Neil's message to Jason, he moved closer to the man who was struggling to hide away from the flashing cameras. With a mischievous glint in his eyes, Liam relayed the message in a whisper. Neil told me to tell you that the next time you try the sh*t you did this afternoon with him again, he is going to make sure you vanish from the face of the earth without remains. As the morning sun rose from the horizon, casting its golden rays upon the cityscape and the street of Whispering Way, inside the huge rental apartment where the Harrisons lived, Mia was seen sleeping on her bed. Her forehead was creased into a deep frown, with beads of sweat glimmering on her face. Her hands were grabbing a handful of sheets as she fought to wake up from her nightmares. "You think I will let you live after what you have made me lose?" said a dark voice in Mia's nightmare. The man, whose face she could never see no matter how hard she tried every time she had this same weird dream, raised his hand and landed a harsh slap against her cheek. Then, before she could get up from the floor, where she had fallen onto when he slapped her, the man pulled out a gun and pointed it towards her head. Before he could pull the trigger, Mia let out a cry, pleading for him not to kill her with a voice that didn't sound like hers. "Goodbye, little one," said the mysterious man before he pulled the trigger, and the loud sound of the gun startled her back to reality. Mia woke up panting like she had just run a marathon in her sleep. Her pajamas were drenched with sweat, and the corner of her eyes still had a glimmer of tears. She pressed a hand to her racing heart while assuring herself that what she just experienced was nothing but a nightmare. It wasn't real. It was just her mind making up fake scenes, like it had always been doing for as long as she could remember. These strange nightmares were the cause of her fear of people raising their hands in front of her. She recalled in her early teens her mother used to take her to see a therapist. However, because she hated all the things the therapist made her do and also felt guilty for how much her mother was spending on every therapy session, Mia had lied to her mother that the strange nightmares no longer bothered her. She took a few deep breaths to calm herself before she would begin to prepare for school, as today was the day she planned to start her part-time job at Mr. Ice Cube's place. However, remembering how he had invaded her room last night and ruined the beautiful red dress, and how he even took the rest of the clothes along with him, she frowned in displeasure. He was just an arrogant man with no sense of consideration. Didn't he know that for someone like her, such things were something to treasure, even though she didn't plan on wearing the other clothes but the red one? She would have even sold them instead of him destroying them like they were nothing. If he had some personal issue with Jason Wallace, which she doubted if he even knew Jason personally considering their difference in career, he shouldn't have come to her and ruined the things Jason kind-heartedly bought for her. He was even arrogant enough to say, "Never take anything from Jason Wallace, and don't even think about being in a relationship with him. I'll provide you with more dresses and shoes than he could ever buy for you." He had said those words with so much authority as if he had a right to her. They weren't even friends, not to mention lovers, for him to stop her from being in a relationship with Jason if she chose to be, which hadn't even crossed her mind. Jason was someone she would never consider dating. Mia thought as she got off her bed to prepare. However, when her eyes fell on the black suit jacket folded on her sofa, she recalled the business card that had fallen from it last night. It was the personal business card of Xavier Galvera in Mirage Mesa, the same man who had secured her education in Ivy Grove. Before Mia fell asleep last night, countless thoughts had run through her mind on how Mr. Bennett was able to get a well-known CEO's personal business card. Though she had tried to do some research on Xavier Galvera last night, she couldn't find his clear images on the internet because it was said that the CEO disliked being on the news and TV. All the images the media managed to take of him were from 2 years ago, and they were all taken from a distance, and his face was never clear in all the images. He was just as mysterious as Neil Weiner in the country. The two men surprisingly disliked showing themselves on TV despite being one of the most wanted people in the media industry in the country. Mia had been curious about how her aloof professor had managed to arrange a meeting with Xavier, and she had discovered the truth last night by connecting the dots. While pondering over how he had obtained Xavier's business card, Mia could only come up with one explanation. Leo had visited her room wearing a business suit the previous day, skipping his usual university duties. This led Mia to believe that Leo Bennett had pretended to be some businessman in order to meet Xavier and get him interviewed yesterday. As a journalism student, Mia was well versed in the art of investigation. Given that Mr. Bennett was a substitute professor in the journalism department, it was likely that he possessed expertise in the media industry. Furthermore, he knew about her scholarship and how Diane could make her father withdraw it. Since he was the one who made her hit Diane that day, he must have suggested for Mr. Galvera to secure her scholarship when he posed as a businessman. These were the only explanations she could think of. Mr. Galvera would never know of her existence unless someone mentioned her to him, and that person was likely Leo Bennett, her enigmatic professor whom she could never quite understand, no matter how hard she tried. Nevertheless, she couldn't resist smiling at the notion that he had somehow contributed to her future career. A fluttering sensation suddenly filled her chest at the thoughts of how he had helped her, and because of that, she wasn't angry that he had eaten all of her snacks, nor did she mind what he had done with the clothes Jason bought for her yesterday. She would make use of one of her dresses on the day of the contest. Anyway, no amount of clothes would make her look any different than she already was. She wasn't that confident in winning over all the beautiful girls participating next week. She had never thought of herself as beautiful because she believed she was average when it came to the students in her university. The chances of a nobody like her winning the most beautiful and intelligent in a school filled with beauty and brains was thin. Though she was only participating because she needed the prize, and because Rain and Carlos believed she was good enough, deep down, she didn't believe she would have any chance at all. Despite those negative thoughts, a smile graced Mia's face as she carefully put her professor's suit jacket inside her bag along with the gray clothes he gave her to wear that day. She would give them to him after her classes, she decided as she dressed up and carried her school bag. Mr. Ice Cube wasn't as heartless as he may appear, and for what he did, she was willing to take all his temper while she would work at his place. She would personally thank him with a delicious home-cooked meal. Chapter 74. Fluttering Feeling. When Mia arrived at school, she was surprised to find many people already working on the university grounds, preparing for the upcoming event next week. Though she knew the event was next week, she wasn't expecting to see people already clearing the grounds and placing platforms for the competition participants. People were coming and going, carrying several things. Meanwhile, students who didn't have classes this morning gathered around, taking pictures and creating stories about the working men, while some were sitting around the blocks discussing the dresses they planned to wear next week. Mia, who had been observing the workers making changes to the school grounds, was about to leave as she had a class to attend, but she halted when she noticed Mr. Ice Cube walking in the opposite direction, engaged in a phone conversation. As he walked and talked on his phone, his expression remained blank. As per usual, he wasn't wearing the typical professor's suit jacket or white button-up shirt like the other professors. Instead, he had on a gray button-up shirt, with the top buttons fastened this time. His black hair appeared disheveled, as if he had repeatedly run his fingers through it. One hand was tucked into his pocket, while the other held the phone to his ear. Without even trying, he exuded both charm and danger. Mia thought to herself as she continued to follow him with her eyes. It was hard to believe that a hunk of a man like him had come into her room last night and even ate her snacks. A few of the students around also noticed him and began to squeal in excitement, as Mr. Bennett was like an idol in Ivy Grove. As if sensing Mia's stare, his head turned towards her direction, where she was standing away from the other students. Mia felt her heart skip a beat when their eyes met from the distance. Just a single eye lock was enough to make her forget where she was at the moment and make her recall things she wanted to forget. Things like him resting his head on her breast when they were sleeping on his bed. She suddenly felt heat rush to her face as the unforgiving image of that day flashed to her mind. She felt like butterflies were dancing in the pit of her stomach as a strange warmth rushed into her, making her unable to look away from him. What was this feeling? She wondered as she found herself staring like an idiot. Subconsciously, she offered him a friendly, polite smile and even waved at him, but he frowned deeply and looked away as if he hadn't even noticed her there and resumed speaking on the phone as he disappeared into the corner. Mia quickly put her hand down and flushed in embarrassment about how he ignored her like he didn't know her. She looked around to see if anyone had noticed how she had made a fool of herself a moment ago, but thank goodness no one was even looking at her as they were all busy doing their things. She pursed her lips and thought how arrogant of him to ignore her like that, but then recalling what he had done for her, she decided to look over it and not allow herself to spoil the good impression of him she had made in her mind. He had spoken to Xavier Galvera about her scholarship, and she was grateful for that. Mia thought with a smile as she continued to stare at the corner he had disappeared into a moment ago, while also wondering what he was going to do there. The corner he entered led to the university's private area that was only reserved for the university's dean and a few of the guests that occasionally visit the school to discuss its welfare and activities. Students were not allowed there, and only a few professors had access to walk in there. But Mr. Bennett, who was just a substitute, was going there. She had once been curious about what the private area looked like, as one could only see the building's huge top from a distance, but she had been shooed away by securities before she could even walk into the corner Mr. Ice Cube walked into so casually, like he was walking into his father's living room. Well, perhaps he had the permission to go there. Mia thought as she made a mental note to ask him what was inside the building the next time she saw him. Mia, who was standing idly while forgetting she had a morning class, was startled by her friend's sudden voice beside her. "Hey, Mia, what are you doing here standing instead of rushing to class?" came Rain's voice as she stood beside Mia, whom she had noticed from the balcony of their class. If she remembered clearly, they had a morning class, but her friend was standing and staring into the distance with a lost expression. Mia, who was startled by Rain, finally looked away from the direction Mr. Bennett had walked into and pressed a hand to her startled heart. "You scared the living soul out of me, Rain," she exclaimed in shock. Rain crossed her hands against her chest and raised a brow. "What are you doing here? Are you forgetting we have Ms. Andrews' class this morning? Or are you just standing here to miss her class on purpose because you don't want to hear about the rules on the events on Monday?" Rain asked, but without waiting for Mia to speak, she continued with a more gentle voice. "I understand if you're avoiding the class because you don't want to be there when the topics in every class today have nothing to do with the school activities but the event on Monday, which I've noticed you're not quite excited about for some reason. Not to mention that White Lotus, Diane, you. I'm not trying to avoid any class. I was carried away by something." Mia cut her off with a small laugh. She knew about the morning class. She had been carried away by her professor. Though it was true she wasn't as excited as everyone about the event, she wasn't avoiding it as it would be the last activity of their sophomore year in Ivy Grove before they would go for their internship program. "Let's go before Ms. Andrew gets to class before we do," said Rain as she pulled Mia along with her while also warning, "Diane is in a mood to kill after what happened at the cafeteria the other day. Be careful of the witch." Mia hadn't seen Diane ever since that drama that took place in the cafeteria because Diane didn't come to school yesterday out of embarrassment. However, Mia would no longer allow the spoiled brat to bully her again now that her scholarship no longer had anything to do with the Fosters, all thanks to Xavier Galvera. Miss Andrew entered the class with a stack of papers in hand. Seeing the woman, the noise in the class quieted down, and all the students looked excited to hear about the rules of this year's event, which they had been looking forward to for months now. The woman cleared her throat and addressed the students, "Good morning, everyone. As you all know, Ivy Grove Institute's annual event is right around the corner, and this year's festivities are going to be incredible." A murmur of excitement rippled through the class as the students exchanged excited glances. "We'll have a fantastic theater play performed by some of our talented performing arts students on stage," Professor Andrews continued, her hand gesturing with excitement. "And, of course, the much-anticipated King and Queen competition." Cheers of excitement erupted from the students, and some began whispering animatedly about the potential winner of the competition. Almost everyone was cheering for Diane. But, the professor's tone became more serious as she quieted the students' excitement. "I must emphasize that the university's governance and trustees will be present, and the entire event will be broadcast live on TV. It's crucial that each of you maintain exemplary behavior. This is not just a celebration for us but also a reflection of our university's spirit." "And," said the woman as she looked around the students, her eyes stopping on Mia, who all the professors knew as the girl who stole someone else's work, before she continued to speak, "I hope you all know that after this semester's holiday, each one of you will be embarking on your internship program, and I also hope you learn to work hard, just like Miss Foster, who didn't just make the professors proud but the president, for presenting such a remarkable story a month ago." The woman turned towards Diane. "Miss Foster, please step forward," announced the professor as she proudly glanced at Diane, who was sitting in the front row with a sour expression, but upon hearing her name, she beamed and stood up. Though she wasn't in a good mood because she had come to school expecting to find out that Mia Harrison was no longer a student in Ivy Grove, only to be disappointed by seeing the girl in school. She had immediately gone to check the scholarship office to see Ms. Adams, who had informed her that Mia's tuition responsibility was no longer under the Fosters or any of the school governance. Diane had been so mad she had wanted to strangle Ms. Adams right then and there. Because of Mia, Mr. Bennett had embarrassed her in the cafeteria. She knew Leo would never have done such a thing if that useless Mia hadn't used some witch charm on him, because no man had ever looked past Diane before. They all ran to her beck and call. Even the professor had shown interest in her when he first arrived at the school by asking her out on a date, but Mia had ruined everything with her plain, pitiful girl act. Diane composed herself and tried to put on a good face for her classmates who were clapping for her as she stepped forward. As applause filled the class, Mia clenched her fists, feeling the weight of her hard work being attributed to someone else. However, since Mr. Bennett had once advised her to let the story go and allow Diane to claim it, she had let it go completely, but she just couldn't help but feel dejected and angry again at this moment when the professor had glanced at her with so much dislike. Ms. Andrews continued to praise Diane while advising the others to be as smart and intelligent as Miss Foster. She then asked Diane what she had requested from the president when she was granted the privilege to ask for anything. Diane walked up to the professor with an arrogant air, a triumphant smile playing on her lips as she glanced at Mia, then back at the professor. "Well, I've always had a knack for making things happen. First off, I requested the most expensive car in the world, and secondly, a ticket to a resort beach house in Eldoria for a holiday along with a lot of skincare. You know how I have to maintain my beautiful looks so I wouldn't age like you, Ms. Andrews." Ms. Andrews' smiling face faltered momentarily at the indirect insult, but she maintained her smiling facade. Meanwhile, the class was suddenly filled with hushed murmurings as people began to whisper of how lucky Diane was to get this opportunity. The resort beach house in Eldoria was a place not all wealthy people could afford, but then they also couldn't help but notice how Diane's arrogance seemed to be more palpable today. Nonetheless, they all overlooked it as she was someone they didn't want to offend in school. Thus, everyone continued to clap for her, while some were giving Mia looks, as if expecting her to jump up and claim the reward as she had claimed the story a month ago like a psychopath. Mia ignored their glares as she calmly watched Diane, who was giving her a smug face. And yet again, she couldn't help but wonder what she must have done wrong to be the target of someone like Diane. The girl had claimed that they knew each other before, but Mia had never known her until she was admitted to Ivy Grove. Chapter 75. Getting inside his car. After their classes ended for the day, Mia and Rain walked out of the class together. "I can't believe Diane's arrogance today. She's too full of herself because of the fame she's getting for something that isn't even hers. For a moment in there, I had the urge to walk up to her and pull her beautiful hair," Rain exclaimed as they walked towards the university's exit. They were done for today's classes. Mia smiled at her friend's words. She couldn't help but be grateful again for having a best friend like Rain, who stood up for her in everything she had done ever since they became friends. "Just let the girl be. I have already let go. She can have the fame of my hard work. Anyway, it's not like I won't have another chance to prove my abilities again," Mia said with a smile. "You're right. We still have our internship program at the end of this semester. By the way, enough of Diane. Our school event is on Monday." Rain squealed in excitement. Today was Friday, and the event had been announced to take place on Monday, with only 2 more days for them to prepare. "Have you decided which of the dresses you'll be wearing? Though I don't like the idea of my brother hitting on my best friend, I still love all those dresses he chose for you. And if you ask me, I think you should wear the red one. You look so beautiful and elegant in it. I bet those idiots who call you plain Jane will bite their tongues and die when they see you." "I can't wait." Mia smiled awkwardly upon hearing Rain's excitement. She didn't know what to say because she no longer had any of the dresses in her possession, as Mr. Ice Cube had ruined them. Of course, she couldn't tell that to her friend, as she knew Jason had spent a huge sum on all those dresses, but her professor had gone ahead and ruined them as if they were nothing but trash. If it wasn't for the fact that he had done something good for her, she would have cursed his entire generation for ruining those dresses and putting her in a tight spot. "I haven't decided on what to wear yet. I will let you know my decision on Sunday." Mia decided to say that for now, until the day she would disappoint everyone in school by wearing her regular dress to the event. She was indeed a plain Jane, and she still believed no amount of dressing and makeup could make her outshine all the others on Monday. She would wear her regular dress and lie to Rain about comfort over fashion. That way, she wouldn't have to tell her that she no longer had those dresses. Mia decided quietly as she tucked the strands of hair falling over her face behind her ear. Actually, Mia's belief that she wasn't attractive enough stemmed from the fact that since she had reached adulthood, no man had ever approached her with the intention of dating or asking her out. Despite her choice to remain single to focus on her studies and career until she found her ideal partner, it was disheartening to never be approached or asked out. This led her to conclude that her lack of feminine attractiveness was the reason men avoided her. As a teenager, this realization was more painful, but over time, she had grown accustomed to it and no longer cared about her appearance. Unbeknownst to her, there was nothing wrong with her looks, and many men had attempted to ask her out. However, Owen's overprotective behavior prevented them from getting close, as he would intervene and claim she was his girlfriend. Observing her friend's slightly dejected expression, Rain smiled and reassured her, "You still have 2 more days to make your decision." She stretched her arms and then, recalling something amusing, she laughed and playfully wrapped an arm around Mia's neck. "You won't believe what happened to Jason. I nearly choked on my breakfast when I saw his face this morning." "What happened to him?" Mia asked curiously as her friend was laughing so hard even before she started explaining what had happened to her brother. And because she found Rain's laughter funny, Mia also began to laugh along with her even before hearing what had happened to the infamous Jason Wallace. The few students walking along the exit path couldn't help but look towards the 2 friends who were laughing like maniacs. Most of the students of Ivy Grove knew Mia as the school's plain Jane while Rain as Carrot Top, and seeing the 2 weirdos laughing like that, they couldn't help but wonder what could be so funny for them to be laughing like crazy people without caring about their image in public. They must be going out of their minds. The curious students continued to stare at them weirdly as they didn't know what was making them laugh so unladylike in public. Finally, Rain stopped laughing and raised her hand to gesture towards her nose while saying, "His nose looked like a huge carrot was plastered on his face. And I saw it on the entertainment show that he was pranked by Liam Thompson, his subordinate in the army." "You know Liam Thompson, don't you?" asked Rain as a faint blush rose to her cheeks at the mention of her teenage crush. Mia smiled and gave her friend a knowing look. "Liam Thompson, your crush?" She knew about Liam Thompson from Rain, who had once showed her his picture on Time magazine last year when he modeled for the yearly military article. She would admit, despite being a soldier, he had nailed the shots on the magazine with his looks. Mia was aware that her friend had had a secret crush on him for a long time to the extent she used his picture as her phone wallpaper and Facebook profile picture. "He's no longer my crush. Jason told me that if I don't stop crushing on a loser, he is going to crush me and freeze my accounts, and Dad will do nothing about it because he is the favorite and the only son. You know how my brother can be, so full of himself." Rain laughed bitterly because despite being the daughter of one of the wealthiest men in the country, her life wasn't all sunshine and rainbows, which was why sometimes she envied her friend's lifestyle and wanted to experience what it would be like if she wasn't born a Wallace. Mia soon bid farewell to Rain at the gate where her limo and the bulky chauffeur, who never smiled, was already waiting for her. After watching the car drive away, Mia began walking down the sunlit street towards the bus station. She wasn't going home yet, as today would be her first day at work in Elite Haven Tower, where Mr. Bennett lived. She had already informed her mother about not coming home early as she had gotten a job. Her mother had even tried to convince her not to work again, as she had started to raise the money for the loan, but Mia had still insisted on working, and thank goodness her mother no longer tried to talk her out of it again. Since Mr. Bennett had said she would be cleaning and cooking in his condo, she had decided to stop by the market and do some grocery shopping so she could cook for him as a token of appreciation. The day she had gone to his condo, she had noticed how it lacked any warmth of a home. His kitchen and fridge were literally empty with no traces of anything eatable. It was as if he had never used anything in the kitchen as they all looked brand new. The only thing she had noticed that wasn't lacking was the wine cabinet filled with different sets of expensive wines. As the bus station wasn't close to Ivy Grove, Mia increased her walking pace so she could get to the market on time to buy everything before going to his place. It was already 1:30 p.m., as they had left school early because Friday was a short day, and she planned to get home by 7 or 6 p.m. Mia was walking while humming a tune to herself, but a sleek black Ferrari abruptly screeched to a stop before her, making her jump in fright. Her heart raced until she recognized the car as Mr. Bennett's. She hadn't seen him after he had ignored her in the morning, and she had thought he would have gone home as they didn't even have his class today, but it turned out he hadn't left yet. He rolled down the tinted window of his car, black sunglasses framing his intense gaze, and he stoically instructed, "Get in." Mia hesitated for a moment. Then, realizing they were heading to the same place, she circled the car and entered the passenger seat. Inside, the car was cold compared to the hot weather outside, and she found herself breathing a sigh of relief at the cool air conditioning as she fastened her seatbelt and placed her bag on her lap. Mr. Bennett hit the gas immediately after she sat down, propelling the car into the city, the engine's roar drowning the street's noises. Why does he always like to speed as if the hounds of hell were chasing him? Mia grabbed onto her bag as if afraid she would get thrown out of the car. She suddenly felt the urge to throw up,